they just came out in a panic, and they're like, "You just start early. If we let them go, they'll never come back from a break." So here I am. Hello. It's true, isn't it? You guys are laughing. Yeah, we wouldn't be here for now. It's lovely to be back here. I was in Sofia, I think 2 years ago at Balkan Fest, which was a really beautiful event, and I really loved it, so it's really nice to be back. But the reason I'm standing here talking to you is because when I was 7 years old, my dad brought home one of these computers. It was an IBM XT compatible and had a 4-color screen, and it had a basic manual with it. And he gave it to me, and he said, "Here, play with it. You can't break it." So I did. I both played with it, and then in time I did break it with fire and smoke. It was amazing. Yeah, don't plug that chip into your computer that your father has told you not to plug into the computer just because it fits. It's okay, I kind of blamed him for it, because a week ago he had dropped a pin into the computer while we were working on it, and I was so scared because the computer really, there was fire. So he comes home and I'm like, "Dad, do you remember that pin you dropped into the computer last week? I think it short-circuited it." And I told him like 15 years later, after I got a new computer, of course. But it was magical. You know, I learned how to program, and I could create stars, and I could create a spaceship, and I could fly through my own universe that I created, and I was 7 years old. And that's magical. That is truly magical. If you can create your own universe when you're 7, you kind of feel like you can do anything. But there was one thing that this computer could not and did not do. It didn't watch everything I was doing. It didn't store everything I was doing. It didn't share everything I was doing with a company somewhere so that they could build a profile of me, so that they could monetize me and they could sell me. It didn't do any of those things. It was just a tool for me to be awesome, which was great. And that's the last time we had this, because we don't have that today. And it's not how it always was either. The personal computer era was a very special era. It started out initially with computers. It started out with mainframes. This is before my time. But these were someone else's computers. They were usually at universities. They were at big companies. And you had to rent time on them. And you didn't own them. The company and the university owned and controlled them. They were centralized. And then, with the Apple, we got the first decentralization in technology, where we had personal computers. We owned and controlled them. They were our machines. They worked for us, and that's it. And then, we got the web. And you might think that the web is decentralized. It's not. The web is just like mainframe computers. Again, we're back to having to work on other people's machines. When we think about the cloud, the Free Software Foundation has a t-shirt that says, "There is no cloud, it's just other people's computers," right? The difference is, with mainframes, they were in universities, they were in a small number of businesses. Now this is the norm. We all work on other people's computers today. So it's centralized again. And what really interests me is what's coming next. What is our version? We can't go back. There's no going back in technology. But how do we go forward to a future where we have the advantages that we had in the personal computer era, but in a networked world? What is that going to look like? That's what really interests me. Because today, every one of your technologies, from the smart television that you have in your living room, to the smart watch that you wear, to the smart car that will drive you to places, to the smart teddy bear that your children play with, to the smart pill that you ingest. They all work, it exists. Some guys are going, well, I'm not going to do that. You are going to do that. They all work the same way, by gathering data about you. Now, this by itself is not the problem. This is how modern technology works. It's a fact of life. We can't change this. What we can change, though, is the answer to this question, which is, who owns and controls this data? Who owns and controls our technology and all of the insight about us that these technologies are gathering? If the answer to that is that we do, as individuals, you and I, then there's no problem. We have a democracy. If the answer, however, is that corporations do, and that by extension, all of this insight about our lives is made accessible to governments as well, then we have a very different type of social system that we're talking about. We're talking not about a democracy, but a corporatocracy. And that is where we are today. We're not sleepwalking into anything. We are there. This is a system that Shoshana Zuboff from Harvard Business School calls surveillance capitalism. In the movie The Matrix, people live in a virtual space while their bodies are farmed from a physical space. Today, we live in the Matrix inverted, where increasingly we live in a physical space, but we are being farmed from a virtual space. And when Mark Zuckerberg says privacy is dead, he's talking about his privacy. Sorry, your privacy, not his. Because his privacy is alive. Because when Mark buys a house, he buys the 4 houses around his house to protect his privacy, because his privacy is not dead, right? Yours is. When Mark uses a computer, he tapes up the microphone and the camera, because he cares about his privacy. He just doesn't care about your privacy. And that's because Mark is a very special man. He is actually one of 8 men who, between themselves, according to Oxfam, have as much wealth, as much money and wealth, as half of the world's population combined. 8 men. There are no women in this statistic, right? 8 men have as much wealth as 3.5 billion people today. This is in a nutshell, this is systemic inequality, right? So, if you're one of these 8 men, very lucky, what should you do? You should probably build some thick and tall walls around you, because you have a lot of stuff. And there are a lot of people out there that don't have a lot of stuff, so you better protect yourself a little bit. And maybe you should also keep an eye on those people, because they may not be up to any good. So you just want to make sure they're okay. And maybe you can do this in the physical space, but you can also do this from virtual space, from digital space. In fact, you can make this your business model, right? Keeping an eye on everyone. This is the business model of Facebook, right? Here's how Facebook works. Facebook has 2 audiences. One, the users, right? We're the only industry, apart from drug dealers, that call the people who use their products users. There's a reason for that, right? And the other audience, the users are the ones who use their products. The other audience is their customers. So these are the companies that actually pay Facebook. These are they're the reason that Facebook makes billions, right? Not the users, the companies that pay them. And the way it works is Facebook watches and tracks and stores indefinitely everything that you do when you're using Facebook. And of course, not just when you're using Facebook. They also buy data from data brokers, from tangible businesses that you interact with, like supermarkets, your pharmacy, etc. And they combine all of this data together. They watch you when you're going from website to website. Every time there's a Facebook like button, they're also watching you, right? Oh, you're on this website. Interesting. You must be interested in that stuff. They combine all of this data together, but that's just the raw materials. That's just what we farm from you, right? And then what do? We continuously analyze this raw material, your information, to gather insight about you, which we put into what we call a profile. Now, a profile is not a piece of paper, a static piece of paper in a manila envelope somewhere. It is a living, breathing simulation of you. And that's what's valuable. We want to know who you are. So we try to recreate you as best as we can with what we know about you. And then that's what we sell. That's what we rent, right, to our customers. They pay us money for pieces of you that they can have. So that's the business model. And this happens, like a lot of this happens in places that we call server farms, yeah? Have you ever asked yourselves what it is we're farming? Because if you do, you might quickly reach the conclusion that it's you. That's what we farm. I call this business model the business model of Facebook, the business model of Google, the business model of Silicon Valley, the business model of mainstream technology today, the business model of the cloud, the business model of the web, people farming, right? Facebook and Google and Snapchat and all of these startups in Silicon Valley that we so admire are factory farms for human beings. So when Facebook, for example, improves its product, we all get excited, right? Oh, new feature on Facebook, new feature on Google. When these companies improve their products, it's like the massages that we give to Kobe beef. It's not for the benefit of the cow. It's to make the cow a better product. In this analogy, you are the cow. And is this business model successful? Hell yes. Very, very successful. Google can track you across 70 to 80% of the web today. The 70% figure is from a Princeton study. The 80% figure is from my own web crawls. So they know what you're doing as you are going through 70 to 80% of the web. Why? Because most of us in this room have allowed them to, have enabled them to. We put Google Analytics on our website, right? And that adds that statistic, because when you have Google Analytics, they can track your visitors. We put a YouTube video, they can track your visitors. We put a Google Plus share button with a script, they can track your visitors. Why can they do this? Thanks to us in this room, right? So we can actually stop them as well. We take those scripts off, that statistic goes down. Google can track us on less of the web as well. It's not just Google, of course, Facebook, etc., but also in the US, internet service providers, thanks to Trump, can now monetize your web browsing history. Your internet service provider, without asking you, can do that. Isn't that crazy? But of course, like Comcast, for example, in the US said, oh, the only reason we lobbied for this and we asked for this and really wanted this is because we don't want to, erode your privacy at all. Of course. Okay, thank you. But do you know who supported them? Do you know who actually supported this? Trump in giving internet service providers your whole internet history, your web history to monetize? Guess who? You might have heard of them. They're a little company called Google. Google actually wrote in defense to say, yes, this is okay. You can do this. Why? Because they were scared that if they said they shouldn't do it for internet service providers, then people might start asking, but why should you be able to track people and monetize their data without asking them? So they said, it's okay. Keep doing it. And it's not just in the US. It's kind of easy sometimes to look at the US and go, idiots, what are they doing, right? A very similar thing is about to happen in the EU. There is an e-privacy proposal that could become law if it's adopted by the European Parliament. Which, the difference is, it still says that you have to ask for permission or consent before you can monetize people's web browsing history for internet service providers. But what happens if every internet service provider wants to do this? And the only way you can use their service is if you say yes. Is that consent? Is it acceptable for us to be faced with the decision of, oh, I can't access the internet, but if I access the internet, then my internet service provider can make money from my whole browsing history. Is that a choice? Is that consent? That's what they think consent is. I don't think so. So we need to fight this. Tim Berners-Lee, who some of you might have heard of, he's also the reason why most of us are sitting here today, right? He recently wrote an open letter in which he said, the three challenges of the web, the first one is that we've lost control of our personal data. And I read this and I thought, okay, but here's the problem. we didn't lose control. So I wrote a response. And my response was, Tim, we didn't lose control. It was stolen from us by these companies. We didn't lose it. It was taken away from us. So some of you might be thinking, but Aral, why should I care? I have nothing to hide, right? Who's got nothing to hide in this room? Come on. I don't care if you know everything about me. Okay, could you guys just stand up? Just stand up for a second. Just stand up. I just want to see how many of you there are. Excellent. Do you have phones? Do you have any phones on you? Yes. You take your phones out. Just take your phones out. I just want to see if this works. Let's see. Yeah, can you unlock your phones? Yeah? Okay, can you just give them to me? I just want to browse through your phone for about 5 minutes. Is that okay? You're going to do it? There's one guy who's actually going to do it. Sorry, and the girl. Thank you. I really don't want to look through your phone. Thank you. Apart from those two, the rest of you sat down. Why? Because it's not about whether you have something to hide. I may not have something to hide. That doesn't mean I want to share everything with you. Right? The definition of privacy is having control over what you want to share and what you want to keep to yourself. That's what we've lost, or that's what was stolen. So in the case of those two people who brought their phones out, that's perfectly fine. If you have the choice to share everything you want to share, and you may not understand the ramifications of that, you may not understand what I can do with that information that I have over you, because it's a power relationship. The more I know about you, and the less you know about me, the more power I have over you in manipulating you. So you may not know that, you may not care. That's fine. But not caring is actually a privilege. When you say you don't care, here's my phone. The gentleman over here. Here's my phone. What you're telling me is I have a lot of privilege. What you're saying is you're probably not a gay person who lives in a country where gay people are prosecuted. Maybe they're sent to jail, maybe they're killed. Because by looking at your phone, I could probably tell whether you're gay or not. Right? And then you might go to jail. You're saying, I don't have to worry about this. Right? So these things happen. Facebook knows that you're gay or not. Facebook can leak this information to advertisers. If you're in a country where you can go to jail for this, or where you can be stoned to death for this, or killed, you care. A lot of us, kind of white men and women living in progressive countries, we may not think that we care about these things. But also, it might be, for example, what happens when these companies are the only ones that have control over our public sphere, but it's private. Well, in Facebook's case, in Pakistan said, look, we want you to remove all of this blasphemy. Blasphemy, right? Blasphemy in Pakistan is punishable by death, right? Or by life in prison. Most people, though, who are accused of blasphemy are killed by vigilantes before they even have their trial. So what does it mean when Facebook says, yes, this is blasphemy and we will remove it, which is what they're doing? What does it mean when Facebook says, we'll send a delegation to talk to you about how we can better tackle blasphemy? We've given up our public sphere. We have no more parks today. All we have are shopping malls, like Facebook. And they decide what we can say and what we cannot say. And they are not separate from these governments, because they do what the governments tell them to, if they have to stay in business, because they're a shopping mall. They're not a park. When will you care? Those of us with privilege in this world, you will care when your friend circle on Facebook, when the people that you know, mean that you cannot get credit. Because Facebook has patented that. Based on your friends, whether or not you are someone who can get a lot of credit or not. You will care when your smart fridge means that your insurance premiums are very high. Because when you ask for insurance, they say, oh, we know what you've been eating. Your smart fridge told us what you've been eating. So these are externalities, right? And there are much more immediate externalities that we can see from this business model as well. So this one site, LifeBuzz, how many trackers do you think this one site has? It's the worst site I can find on the internet right now. How many on the web? 10, 20, 30 trackers? 40, 50, 60 trackers, 70, 80, 90? No. How about 172 third-party tracking scripts? So you guys worry a lot in the JavaScript world about performance, right? We're like, hey, Chrome's got better performance in this release. Hey, I know how to make performance better. Fucking take the 172 tracking scripts off of that site, see how it performs. Right? You know how it performs? It performs 14.5 times faster when you're not trying to see everything that everyone is doing on your site and leaking that to 172 different people. Yeah? That's performance for you. But it doesn't stop there. This is a very popular site. It's a clickbait site. So it relies on things like the psychological motives that we have, addiction, etc. So it's very popular. It gets over 250 million page views a month. So I calculated this. This is their corporate site, by the way. Remember 2 audiences? To their users, they're like, here are all these interesting and crazy stories. Click on these. To their customers, they say, by using this, we got all of these stupid people. We have 250 million stupid people. What do you want to do with them? You know, dumb users, right? That's what we call them. And they say, hey, 87% of those are from the United States. And we know how many people in the United States use the web, browse the web on their mobile phones. We have that statistic. We know how much 1 gigabyte of data, mobile data, costs in the United States. Using that, you can figure out that this one site costs just people in the US who browse the web only on their mobile phones $4 million every month just to load their third-party trackers, not any content. So that's the dollar cost of this bullshit business model, right? What else? What about the human life cost? Have you ever been to Forbes? Forbes.com? Anyone? Forbes.com? Yeah. You go in and you get this interstitial, they call it in ad tech, right? I call it a door slam. You go to the site and it goes boom, slam in your face. Why? There's an inspirational quote. And of course there's the ad that they want you to look at for 3 seconds, because that button doesn't say continue to site. It says 3, 2, 1. Now you may click to continue to site. Right? And you're like, wow, this is the exciting morning I was hoping for. So that's about 5 seconds. It appears, 3-second wait, and then you kind of lightning fast reflexes, you hit the button, you have 5 seconds. Very, very popular website. They get 46 million unique visitors a month. So I thought, let's be conservative. Let's only imagine that these people visit once a month, right? And they wait 5 seconds. 46 million people waiting 5 seconds. Do you know how much human life is lost to this one site? Every month, 7.3 years. In 1 year, over 87 years of actual human life is lost to one interstitial, one door slam on one site. That's more than the life expectancy in most countries. So externalities, right? What's another externality we're all familiar with? Fake news. Fake news is big, right? Or maybe that's fake, I don't know. Fake news. Why do we have fake news? We have fake news because we no longer have a free press. We don't have journalism anymore. The journalism industry has been replaced by the behavioral advertising industry. Ad tech. You don't have to take my word for it. Axel Springer, one of the biggest publishers in Europe, some of you might be familiar with them, their lawyer actually said this. The core business of Axel Springer is to deliver ads to its visitors. Journalistic content is just a vehicle to get visitors to view the ads. So what is journalism today? It's bait. Journalism is bait to get you to view the ads. Do you understand now why fake news happens? Because you follow the eyeballs no matter where they go, right? That's what ad tech does. And we get fake news. Doc Searle, some of you might know him. He is the co-author of the Blue Train Manifesto and the attention economy. He wrote a really good post recently saying banks need to fire, brands too as well, brands need to fire ad tech, right? In which he makes that case, and it's beautiful. I mean, it's just, I love this. He says, let's be clear about the difference between ad tech and real advertising.
It's ad tech that spies on people and violates their privacy. It's ad tech that's full of fraud and a vector for malware. It's ad tech that incentivizes publications to prioritize content generation over journalism. It's ad tech that gives fake news a business model, etc., etc., etc. Right? So that's great. But there's also the government. So all of this data that we're gathering with our corporations, with our companies, the governments want that as well. And in the UK, for example, they passed a bill called the IP Act, which mandates that you must have backdoors on all communication technologies, so that the government can listen in on all technologies. So this would, when implemented, completely do away with encryption as well. You couldn't have end-to-end encrypted services in the UK. This is law now. This is law. It's not. It may not be implemented at the moment or executed, but this is law. And will they use it? Yeah. Amber Rudd, who is the Home Secretary, said, you know, there must not be anywhere where terrorists can talk to each other without us listening in, right? Which also means there must be nowhere that you can talk to each other without them listening in. This is the same woman who thinks that hashing and hashtags are the same thing. All right? These are the people who are making the fucking policy right now. So if you want one photograph to show you what surveillance capitalism truly is, I can't find a better one than this. These are the heads of the top technology companies today, who among themselves have more intimate information about the personal lives of more people than anyone has ever had in the history of mankind, sitting on the same table, at the same table with then President-elect Donald Trump. If this doesn't scare the shit out of you, nothing will. And you might be saying, okay, but why is this important? Because it creates an unimaginable power differential between these people who know everything about you and you don't know anything about them. I'm just reading Yanis Varoufakis' book, in which it's called "And the Weak Suffer What They Must." And in it, he has a quote from Thucydides, from his Melian dialogue, where the Athenian generals, because Athens is so strong, when they approach the Melians and they say, you should surrender to us, they say, and the Melians say, why should we surrender to you? We've done nothing wrong, we're just living here on our little island. Why should we surrender to you? Because they say, the strong actually do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must. So I actually see this as a war between two species. One of the species is us, Homo sapiens sapiens. The other is multinational corporations. A war for what? A war for information. A war over data. And what a problematic term this is, data. Because we use one word when we're talking about information about rocks, and we use the same word when we're talking about information about people. And this is very problematic. Because I cannot emotionally hurt a rock. I cannot physically hurt a rock. I can try, I'll probably hurt myself. I cannot incarcerate a rock. I can't put a rock in prison. I can't put a rock in jail. I cannot deprive a rock of its life. I can do all of these things to people. So what does it mean if we use one word, data, unqualified, when we're building policies that protect the rights of rocks and protect the rights of people? When we conflate those together and we just talk about data, it's a meaningless term, right? Because the people, the group here, is it the rock or the person that's going to come out badly from this? I think it's the person that's going to come out badly. So let's say we're talking about people. What is data about people? Let me illustrate. Let's say I have a tiny statue, a statuette, a figurine, right? If I have enough data about this figurine, I can take a 3D printer and I can create a facsimile, a recreation of this little figurine, right? If I have enough data about it. What can I do if I have enough data about you? I'll give you a hint. I don't want to 3D print you. But I do want to simulate it. I want to own that simulation, and then I'm going to use that simulation to manipulate you for my profit motive and for my political motives as well. So data about people, we have to start understanding. When we're talking about data about people, we're talking about people. So when you hear things like data is the new oil, think about it. What are we saying when we're saying people are the new oil? What business are we in? And who are you? Who are you in the digital age? This is you. And this is how we normally draw the boundaries of the self. We draw the boundaries of the self at our biological boundaries. We've done so for thousands of years. Over those thousands of years, we've very slowly created a system of laws and justice that protects those boundaries of the self, that protects the integrity and the sanctity of the human being. So what happens, though, when technology comes into the equation? What is our relationship with technology? Is it one of two actors having a conversation? If I have an idea, and I don't want to store that idea in my biological brain, but I want to store it somewhere else, do I tell my phone, hey Siri, right? Write this in the notes application, and then my phone goes, what did you say? No, it says, okay. I didn't get that at all, sorry. It says, okay, I'll write it. Is it a conversation? In which case, surveillance is what surveillance has always been. Signals capture between two actors having a conversation. Or is it something very different? When I have a thought, and I don't want to store it in my biological brain, but I want to store it in my electronic brain, what if what I do is I extend my mind, and I extend myself using my technology? Now, if this is the relationship that we have with technologies, then it would make perfect sense for us to expand our understanding of the boundaries of the self to include the technologies by which we extend ourselves, so that we start seeing them as parts of ourselves. And then what does surveillance become? Something very different. It becomes an assault on the self. And we already have a system of laws and justice that knows how to deal with assaults on the self. So there are three things we have to understand. One, that today we are cyborgs. That doesn't mean we have to implant ourselves with technologies. Most of our technologies today are not implants, they are explants. But we extend ourselves using technology. And therefore, we must extend the understanding of the self to include these technologies. Because our relationship to technology is not one of a master talking to a servant. It is the relationship between a cyborg and its organs. The organs don't have to be inside your body, as discussed here, if that makes sense. And then we have to understand that to protect our rights in the age that we're living in, we don't need to create a new set of rights, digital rights, etc. Because the people who want us to create a new set of rights usually have a vested interest in those rights being lesser than the human rights we already have. All we need to do is apply the human rights that we already have and understand to the cyborg self. We need to, in essence, and this is not going to happen overnight, go from having the Universal Declaration of Human Rights to the Universal Declaration of Cyborg Rights. When we understand the nature of the self, we can then protect it. We can regulate it. We can't regulate today. We cannot tell these companies that are storing everything about you and selling you, we can't tell them stop doing that. Because the politicians and the policymakers who should be telling them to do that are being lobbied to the tune of hundreds of millions of euros in Europe alone to not regulate them. We call this lobbying. It's perfectly legal. Perfectly legal. And there are revolving doors. The same policymaker who's at the European Commission right now, who should be protecting your rights, your privacy, your human rights, against companies like Google and Facebook, etc., who should be regulating them, who should be telling Google, you can't do this. You're violating these people's rights. The same person in 5 years' time is going to be working at Google. It's perfectly legal. It's called a revolving door. We call these things public-private partnerships. We call it multi-stakeholderism. Let's bring everyone with a stake to the table. But what about the size of those stakes? Some people have very big stakes. We call it co-regulation. Hey, Google, come to the table. Tell us, how should we regulate you on privacy? So that's like saying, hey, Philip Morris, come to the table. How should we regulate you on healthcare? And they go, hey, we have some ideas about that. Yeah, thanks for asking. By the way, we paid for the table. Do you like it? Let's call these things what they actually are, which is institutional corruption. Unless we can remove the influence of corporate finance in public policy making, we cannot regulate these giant monopolies. But regulation doesn't just have to be legislative. There is also regulation that we can implement technically. That's what we do at my tiny social enterprise. We are a 2-person and 1 husky social enterprise, now based in Sweden, in Malmö. And we make an app called Better on Mac and iOS. It's a free and open source app, and it blocks these trackers. So you can actually go to our source control repository, source.indie, and build it yourself. And we also, the way we make money, what's our business? Do we spy on people? You know, is this a tracker blocker that, like, you know, also makes money from advertising, like AdBlock Plus? Do you guys know that that's what they do? How fucking cheeky, right? Here, AdBlock Plus. What is your business? We're an advertising company. We actually sell ads, and we get money from Google. Or no, that's not what we do. People who want to support us can also buy it on the App Store and actually give us money for it. Much more honest transaction. But what we do is we block trackers. We block all of these companies from tracking you on the web. And as we do that, we also end up improving the experience that people are having. It's a nice side effect. This, for example, is what the Los Angeles Times website looks like when you first go to it. It's beautiful. Beautiful door slam in your face, right? And then you get past the door slam, and this is what it looks like. There's the ad, there's the content starting, there's like, I love this, support quality journalism. I'd love to, show me some. And you get things like this. This is just me scrolling down while I was taking screenshots, you know, this week. This is an article, like a part of the article when you're scrolling. I love that. We know ads suck. That's an ad. This is an ad. That's promoted ads. And then support quality journalism. I love that. Or you get things like this. Taboola ad. Even these are ads. It's not content there. It's one site. So what happens when you block the trackers is that you go from this, you know, to this, where it's just the content as it should be. So that's technological regulation. That's what we do with Better. That's one way we can stop these abuses. But regulation is a short-term instrument. It's necessary, but it will not fix the problem. We need to go beyond just regulation to create ethical alternatives. What do I mean by ethical alternatives? What does ethical technology mean? Is it some sort of like a deep philosophical academic thing? No. It's very, very simple. At its core, it centers around respect. Respect for what? Respect for human rights at its core. But we can go beyond that. How about we also respect human effort? And hey, let's go beyond that. How about we also respect human experience in the things that we build? How does this then translate pragmatically to the things that we build? Well, if you respect human rights, you're not going to be spying on everyone. You're not going to be looking at everything that they do because you respect their privacy, which is a core human right. So you're not going to build centralized services. You're not going to build cloud services. You're going to build decentralized, peer-to-peer services where you don't even know what they're saying, which are zero-knowledge services. You're probably going to make this free and open because you want to contribute to a healthy commons that we can all benefit from. And you will probably make that interoperable because you don't want to lock people in to what you're doing. You want to be able to compete on providing the best service possible to them. And you will make it accessible so that it's not just able-bodied white men and women that get to use it, right? But people with all ranges of backgrounds, all ranges of abilities. And you will make it sustainable and you will make it secure. What about human effort? A lot of people do that, right? We call it the Free Software Foundation, the free and open source. But they stop there. No. It also has to be functional and reliable. It has to work, or else no one's going to use it. And then we can go further. Let's make it delightful. Let's make these things beautiful and gorgeous. But only starting out, if we start out with that core of respect for the human being. Because what we do today is we do 2 out of 3, right? We do 2 out of 3. What we don't have is respect for human rights at the core of the things that we're building. But we care a lot about the effort and the experience. But what happens then? If your core is rotten, if at the core you are exploiting and manipulating people, then anything you're building on top of it then, you're not designing. You're taking something that if you exposed it just as it is, here's our core, here's what we do. Google said, we watch everything that you do. We buy data about you from people that you don't even know exist. And we manipulate that to manipulate your behavior. Who would use Google? No one. Because that is unpalatable. It stinks. People can smell it. So what do you have to do? You need to decorate it. You need to build beautiful decoration on top of it. So what you're doing there, if your core is rotten, is you're not doing design. You're practicing decoration. You're trying to make something that people would otherwise reject palatable to them because they don't see the rotten core. So we need to move away from that. This is ethical design. Look on Indie/ethical design for more. But we can't create these things with the same funding model, with the same economic system, social system that we have. So I'm not talking about startups here, right? Startup is a very specific brand. I'm not talking about venture capital here. We have to move beyond venture capital because this is how venture capital works. Here's Mark, and he has a startup. He's just starting out, he's young, right? And he says, I need money. So he goes to a venture capitalist. And he says, hey, I have this business model. I'm farming people, so it's compatible with what the rest of Silicon Valley does. And if I'm successful, in a couple of years, I'm going to have like 200 million, 300 million livestock, that I'm farming. How much money will you give me today for when we sell those people in 5 years, 6 years' time, right? How much money will you invest in the exit? And the venture capitalist says, well, Mark, you're probably going to fail. 9 out of my 10 investments is going to fail. But if you succeed, because you're farming people, and it's very lucrative, you could be $1 billion unicorn. So I'm going to give you some money for when we can sell those people if you succeed. Venture capital doesn't invest in the business. It invests in the sale of the business, in the exit. You don't build a sustainable world with this model because it's based on selling. It's not based on a successful long-term business. So startups are disposable businesses. They're either supposed to fail quickly or succeed astronomically and get sold, either to other companies that have a compatible business model or with an IPO to the market. And it's a Silicon Valley brand. I think we can do better here in Europe. I don't think we need to worship at the shrine, the altar of Silicon Valley. Instead of startups, why don't we build stay-ups? Why don't we build businesses that are sustainable and long-term? Why don't we build our technology not in a centralized manner, but a decentralized manner? Could you imagine an indie net, where when Facebook says to share your photo with your friends, you must first share it with me so that I can run facial recognition on it to understand who's in the photo, I can run sentiment analysis to understand the relationship between those people, I can keep this forever and use it for whatever purpose I want until the end of time, and then I will send your friend a copy of that message or your photo. We say, no, Facebook, that's actually bullshit. That's not the only way you can build technology. On the internet, if you want to share your photo with your friend, you share your photo directly with your friend. Can this be done? Yes. I built a prototype of it. We crowdfunded a prototype. It's called Heartbeat, and it was about a year ago that we built this. It worked. It was a beautiful experience. It was a first prototype. We're now going to be building a second prototype going forward. But I want you to imagine So there's no technical infeasibility. If basically a team of mostly one, with help from 2 other people during this project specifically, within a span of 7 or 8 months can create an alternative, then do not tell me this cannot be done, right? With $100,000 in crowdfunding, right? You can't get $100,000 from a VC. If your idea is that you want to build a social network that farms people where you can only say yo, you will get a minimum of 5 million, okay? So imagine an internet where every one of us has their own space, where we can be found, where we can be reached, where we can be public about things we want to be public about, and private about things we want to be private about. And it is this place that all of our smart devices connect to. They don't connect to Google, to Facebook, to whatever. They connect to your own space. And this is not a space that you have to care about and secure, because it's an interoperable system. Lots of different providers can provide this same service to you, and you can move between one and the other. So you don't have to worry about keeping it secure either. At the core of this, if we decide that this should actually be a human right, maybe we should start to support the core from the commons. Initially, in our current system, maybe you pay for it. But then we decide, hey, this is something that people should have. So we start supporting it from the commons. And these providers who provide the service, they're free to develop on top of it, to expand its features, to add new things to it. But you got the base from the commons. It is only fair that whatever you add, you give back to the commons. That's how we build a healthy commons. That's how we don't just privatize from the commons, but we supply it, we nurture it, we grow it. But what about providing those additional services? Maybe the core of it is free for everyone, supported by our tax money, but then any additional features, well, maybe those providers can charge for that. So we start building a healthy economy, not on a rotten core, but on an ethical core going forward. And if we do that, then the answer to this question that I posed at the very beginning, who owns and controls our data, our technology, the insight about our lives, and who owns and controls us, essentially, the answer to that question becomes we do, individuals. And I'm not working on this for any other reason than because I know what technology can be like, having been that 7-year-old with that magical experience with a tool that just worked for me. I know how empowering and wonderful that can be. I know what that means for our species going forward if we can have that in a networked age. I'm not doing this because of charity. I'm not doing this because of philanthropy. I'm doing it because this is the world that I want to live in. I'm trying to build the world that I want to live in. And the only advice I can give to you, and the challenge that I present to you today, is help build the world you want to live in. Thank you. We currently have 10 minutes for questions, so please feel free to have a microphone here as well.
Raise your hands, guys, if you have questions.
Why don't you guys come out? Oh, okay, come up as well. Or stand up. So
Okay, yeah.
Right, thank you. Oh man, hello.
Powerful. And I have the following questions. Like, we use internet, usually use some applications, and it's really hard to compete, let's say, with Google, for example.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, very good question. Thank you very much. So it's very hard to compete with Google. Yes. What happened during the Industrial Revolution? We started cutting down all the trees, right? And we started mining into the earth with new machines that we didn't have before. And we were doing it on a scale that had never been seen before. So we realized, though, that if we kept doing it at that rate, then we were not going to have a habitat anymore. So in every revolution, industrial, and people call this the fourth industrial revolution. I don't know if you've heard about that. It's one of these terms. you start out by exploiting, or at least in capitalism, exploiting the natural resources that you have, right? And that's kind of why we have all the climate and the environmental catastrophe that we have today as well. But we realized if we kept going at that rate, we would be extinct very quickly. So we started regulating them. Because some companies were just exploiting the natural resources and making lots of money. Why? Exploitation is great business, right? You make a lot of money. If you go and you cut down the whole Amazon rainforest, you make a lot of money. Do you fuck the species? Yes. You make a lot of money doing it though, right? It's the same here. Why is it hard to compete with Google? Because they're exploiting, with no regulation, their natural resources. What are the natural resources? Not trees this time. It's us. The moment you start regulating them, this is why it's so important, when you say you cannot abuse people this way, right? It is not sustainable, it is not right. The moment you start regulating them, you give alternatives a chance to arise, right? You also have to fund those alternatives differently. So, yes, you will not be able to compete with Google because they're not competing fairly. It's like they're dumping their services. Free, right? It's not free. We don't understand the cost, and we don't understand the human element, the human cost of what they're doing. As we do that, we can regulate them, we can give these alternatives a chance to appear. And then, if we realize that these alternatives are the ones that we want to use because they create the kind of life we want to have, then we support that with our tax dollars, right? Which company builds your roads? Which company builds your parks? We support things that we feel are in all of our interests, the common good, from the common purse. And maybe that's what we need to start thinking towards. But it's a bridge. That's not going to happen overnight. We need to start building these prototypes, we need to show people it's possible, and we're slowly building a bridge, hopefully to a more sustainable future. Because realize right now, you're right, we've lost this battle. We lost this battle without even knowing there was a battle, right? So don't fool yourselves. There's no battle here. We're not fighting Google or Facebook or anything. We've lost. We have been entirely decimated. What we're trying to do is build a different path forward. You can't fight a lost battle. They won. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
There is not only bad tracking. There's tracking that I collect data in order to learn about my user and give them better service.
Right.
I think it's, if we block everything, we cannot improve our product.
Right. Okay. So
I see you have a smartwatch, right?
I have a smartwatch. Yeah, very observant of you. That's great. So let me answer all three of your questions. So, number one, is there such a thing as good tracking? Yes. It's not what you do. If you're tracking me, that's never good, right? My watch, my phone can track me, learn about me, understand my behavior, and then improve the experience for me. That's me learning about me, as long as it doesn't reach you. You, the company, right? It doesn't reach you. You give me the algorithms. All those algorithms you use to learn about me, those shouldn't be with you. They should be with me. You give me those algorithms, my own device starts learning about me, I start learning about me. That's fine. That's a decentralized system. Right? Because if it's a centralized system, sure, you might say, we're only using this to learn more about. Google only says, we're only using this to make your life better, right? It's a colonial attitude. It's basically the white man saying, trust me. I bring you the fire. Look at the fire. Trust me. Nothing bad ever came out of colonialism, right? They trusted us. I love that. Have you guys seen that instant messenger conversation that Mark Zuckerberg had when he first founded Facebook? When it was 400 people on Harvard? So he has an instant messenger conversation with his friend, and this was posted on the New Yorker in an article, and he actually said, yes, I had this. So he actually admitted to having it. And it goes like this, it's beautiful. He's writing to his friend, hey, if you want to know anything about anyone at Harvard, just let me know. I have over 400 student numbers, email addresses, this information. And his friend goes, wow, how did you manage that one? And Mark says, I don't know. They just gave it to me. They trust me. And here's the best bit. Dumb fucks. But that was when, he was young and foolish. I'm sure the intervening years of astronomic fortune and fame have made him more nuanced in how he sees things. But thank you for your question. And by the way, the watch, which is your other question, you also have to understand that this stems from business models. It's not because people who work at Google are evil. The people at the very top of Google know exactly what they're doing. Eric Schmidt knows exactly what he's doing. And for him, it's not just a business. It's not just his profit motive. It's a political motive that he has. He believes in neoliberalism, he believes in the American way and spreading that across the world, etc. People who work at Google, who do CSS and JavaScript, they're probably about as calm as we are. Because Google tells them, when you work at Google, you're going to make the world better. You're going to be helping so many people. And they believe that. I mean, a lot of people are, I believe, inherently good. I think we have a handful of assholes who are running the show, that we're letting them run the show, but I think inherently, most people are inherently good and want to do the right thing. So I think as much as Google lies to the people who use their products, it doesn't tell them, the core of their business model, they lie to the people who work there as well. When I spoke with Eric in London at a very informal event, little cocktail party, and I was talking to him and I was calling him out and I was saying, you keep talking about why governments should have all this data, etc. Why should Google have this data? Explain that to me. And the thing he said to me was, he said, if we ever become too evil, we'll never find anyone to work for us. So is he aware of it? He's aware of it. Is it happening right now? Yes. Are people as proud today to be working at Google and Yahoo as they were 5 years ago? Not as much. Not everyone. It's getting much harder to ignore what their work is being actually used for. And that's part of how we win this. Because if you're aware of this, I mean, of course you might be working at companies that do this right now. This is the mainstream, this is the norm. But there are a lot of companies, especially in Europe, that don't do this. That just sell a product to people. They don't sell people. And maybe if you realize that, maybe your next job, because we have a lot of privilege, we can choose to some degree, those of us in our room with our skill set, maybe we will choose to use our skills to help those companies instead of helping people farmers. And that's how we start to win. So again, I didn't answer the question though about the watch. So business models are very important. I'm going to end with this one, if that's all right. Business models are very important. You have to ask, how do you make money? Google makes money by learning as much about it as possible and monetizing that. How does Apple make money? Apple makes money by selling you very expensive toys, right? So when Apple sells me an iPhone at however 100 whatever euros it is, they're happy at that point. They have made a good profit on that. When Google sells you an Android phone, they're not happy at that point. If I take that Android phone and I put it into a drawer somewhere, and I never use it, Google hates me. Because it's only when I start using that, I sign into Google Play, they start watching me, that's when that's when I'm contributing to their bottom line. So, tell me why I'm wearing an Apple Watch right now instead of an Android watch. Because if you have two companies, both of them billion-dollar companies, and one company has something they can compete on without breaking a sweat, right? If, let's say Apple is spying on everyone because they're closed and we don't know. Let's say that Tim Cook has a fetish and he just spies on everyone because he loves it, gets off on that, right? And let's say that tomorrow they say, oh shit, this is bad. We just realized, sorry, we didn't realize earlier. We're not going to do it. What's the effect on Apple's bottom line, on the money that they make? If let's say they're spying on everyone, they stop. Nothing. They don't make their money that way. Now let's say Google tomorrow have a moment, an epiphany, and they say, wait a minute, we shouldn't be spying on everyone. This isn't nice. I feel dirty now. I'm going to stop. What happens to their bottom line? They go bankrupt. The only thing I can trust in capitalism is that a company will not work against its financial interests. If you have something that you can compete on without breaking a sweat that would make your main competitor go bankrupt, that's an absolute competitive advantage. And unless you're an idiot, you would not throw that away. Apple is not a long-term solution, but I think it's a good stopgap today. It's probably the best we have, their platforms. We need to build a bridge to a future where we have open, not proprietary, commons-based systems. But I think Apple's a good stopgap. We need to have one leg of that bridge somewhere, or else we don't have a bridge. Thank you.